In the winter of 1987, a school bus carrying 12 students drove past its final stop and vanished. No tire tracks, no calls for help, just silence. 37 years later, during renovations at an abandoned farmhouse, a hidden wall cavity is discovered. Inside, one of the students' backpacks, perfectly preserved. But it's what was inside the backpack that reopens the case and reveals a truth more disturbing than anyone imagined. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button if you love cold case mysteries, chilling discoveries, and psychological thrillers that unravel layer by layer. March 4th, 2024. Location: Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. It started with a hammer strike. Dust billowed from the drywall as Eli Granger pried loose the last brittle panel. He'd spent most of the morning gutting the walls of the old farmhouse, an abandoned property outside Harrow Creek, slated to become a short-term rental. He was 2 hours behind schedule, his shirt soaked with sweat, when the wall gave way. Behind it wasn't pipes, wasn't insulation. It was a hidden compartment, and inside, something red. Eli hesitated, wiping his brow. He reached in, fingers brushing against cracked plastic. He pulled it out slowly, a faded red backpack with a stitched-on patch that read, "Property of Benjamin Kessler, Harrow Creek Elementary." Eli froze. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in decades. Not since that bitter January morning in 1987, when bus number 37 vanished off its rural route, taking 12 children and its driver with it. He stared at the backpack like it might move. Then, unable to help himself, he unzipped it. Inside were two things: a stack of loose Polaroids, some blurred, some too dark to make out, and others that clearly showed children in the bus aisle, some looking straight into the lens. A cassette tape, labeled in blue ink. Stop number 13, play me. January 12th, 1987. Location: Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. The morning began like every other bitter Pennsylvania winter morning, bone-cold, gray-skied, and too quiet. Bus number 37 rolled out from the Harrow Creek School District parking lot at 6:15 a.m., its engine growling like an old beast forced awake. The driver, 58-year-old Earl Brenner, had worked the same rural route for nearly 2 decades. He didn't say much, didn't need to. He drove, he smoked, and he made his 12 stops, always in the same order, always with the same grim punctuality. 12 children, ages 9 to 13, climbed aboard that day. There were no warnings, no threats, no inclement weather, just a cold, crisp morning and a half-full tank of diesel. The last person to see the bus was a farmer named Walter Riggs, who waved as it passed his property at 6:47 a.m., heading west along the back loop road, a stretch of cracked pavement that weaved through fields, woods, and 2 long-abandoned barns. He remembered it because he always saw the bus pass his silo before sunrise, always waved. Earl never waved back. That morning, Walter's wave went unanswered again. But what he didn't know, what no one would know for 37 years, was that bus number 37 never reached the school. At 7:08 a.m., when attendance began, the homeroom teacher noted 5 absences. By 7:35 a.m., it was 12. At 8:10, the principal tried calling Earl's home. No answer. At 8:44, the school secretary contacted the transportation office. They confirmed the bus had departed. But by then, no one could reach it. By 9:10 a.m., 2 patrol units were sent out to drive the route. They never found the bus. Parents gathered at Harrow Creek Elementary in their winter coats, confusion turning to fear. Snow began to fall lightly. Officers canvassed the roads, the ditches, the woods. Nothing, no tire marks, no broken branches, no sign of impact. It was like the bus had simply vanished off the face of the earth. Back in the present, March 5th, 2024. Detective Callie Hartman stood in the conference room of the Harrow Creek Police Department, staring at a row of yellowing case files spread out on the table like a grim mosaic. "Benjamin Kessler's backpack," she said, half to herself. "Sealed inside a farmhouse wall 30 miles off route. How the hell did it get there?" The walls were plastered with photos, aged snapshots of children's faces in school portrait lighting. 12 kids, all smiling, all gone. The case had haunted the town, especially her father, Sheriff Alan Hartman, who had led the investigation until his retirement in 2005. He died 4 years later, never knowing what happened to those children. Callie was 10 years old in 1987. One of the missing kids, Riley Spear, had been in her Sunday school class. She remembered his crooked glasses and how he always passed her notes with stick figures drawn on them. She still had one, tucked away in an old Bible. The evidence from the farmhouse sat on the table now, secured in transparent bags. The Polaroids, the cassette, and that red backpack with a cracked zipper. "Lab's working on the prints," said Officer Marisol Dunn, stepping into the room. "But the bag's in surprisingly good shape. Whoever sealed it behind that wall wanted it preserved." "And what about the tape?" Callie asked. Marisol hesitated. "We had to find a working cassette player. One of the techs had one in his garage. He digitized the audio." She tapped her tablet, brought up the file. Callie leaned forward as the static-filled recording began. A boy's voice came first. Quiet, nervous, maybe 11, 12 years old. "It's Ben. If someone finds this, I hope it's someone good. The bus didn't stop. We passed my house. Stop number 13. He said we were going to the farmhouse, but I don't think this is a field trip." A pause. Breathing. "Please don't let my mom think I ran away." The tape cut out. Callie sat back, heart hammering. The driver didn't miss the stop. He skipped it. Intentionally. She pulled out the caseboard. One by one, she stuck magnets under the children's names. Benjamin Kessler, 11. Found backpack Riley Spear, 10. Tasha Velez, 9. Marcus Elliott, 12. Whitney Dane, 13. Trevor Calhoun, 12th. Emily Shore, 9th. Harper Lee Chen, 10th. Devin Price, 11th. Tyson Graves, 10th. Layla Freeman, 12. Caleb Wick, 11. All 12 had disappeared without a trace. Most were never seen again. No bodies, no bus, just a town left hollowed by grief. Until now. In the corner of the evidence bag sat one more object, an envelope tucked into the backpack's outer pocket. On the back was a hand-drawn number, 13. Inside were 6 photographs. All of them showed the same thing, the inside of a bus, shot from the rear, where the emergency exit would be. The aisle, the seats, the children. In the first photo, the kids were laughing. In the last photo, they were all facing forward, hands on their laps, staring at something out of frame. There was no driver in sight, just a figure standing at the front of the bus. Blurry, too dark to make out a face, but it wasn't Earl Brenner. March 6th, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. The farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel path, hidden behind a collapsed barn and a thicket of leafless oaks. Officially, it was listed as Parcel 41B in Harrow County property records. Uninhabited since the mid-90s. Purchased recently by a Portland investor who planned to flip it into a bed and breakfast. But now it was a crime scene. Detective Callie Hartman stood on the porch with her coat zipped to the chin, wind biting at her cheeks. The farmhouse was older than it looked in the listing photos. Peeling clapboard siding, rotted porch steps, one window boarded up. A structure no child should have ever been taken to, let alone 12. "This place gives me the creeps," said Officer Dunn, stepping beside her. "Like something out of a photograph you don't remember taking." "Did CSU finish the cavity sweep?" "They just wrapped. Nothing else in the walls except some nesting insulation and a bird skeleton. but the cavity had been sealed with fresh screws. Drywall was newer than the rest of the room. Someone reopened it. Dunn nodded. Sometime after the 90s, based on screw corrosion, maybe even early 2000s, Callie ducked under the yellow tape and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Dust, rot, something vaguely chemical. The room where the backpack was found was empty except for one thing, a child's drawing in faded crayon, taped crookedly to the opposite wall. Callie stepped closer, squinting at the drawing. It showed a school bus on a dirt road. Behind it, a red-roofed house with 3 windows. In the yard were children with blank faces, all drawn in a row. The sky was filled with black spirals, and in the upper corner there was something else. A stick figure. Tall, alone. No eyes, just a single word written beside it. Him. In 1987, Benjamin Kessler had been described as a quiet kid. Good grades, polite. His mother worked at the post office. His father had been a local pastor, killed in a car accident 2 years prior. Benjamin's disappearance had nearly destroyed his mother. And now his drawing was here. Dunn snapped a photo of the crayon picture. Think this is his? Callie nodded. Matches the style in his school folder. I saw one of his drawings in the archive box last night. Dunn crouched beside the wall. See this? She pointed to faint outlines behind the drywall seam. Somebody painted over something. The outline looks like handprints. Get a UV wand in here. While CSU continued the sweep, Callie drove to the Harrow Creek Historical Society, where dusty case files, newspaper clippings, and old police records lived in chaos. She needed to know more about that farmhouse. She found a record book dating back to 1962. Parcel 41B had belonged to the Rylance family, farmers turned landlords. The house had been rented out many times, last officially in 1992, by a man named Harold Wainwright. No employment listed. Moved out in 1995. No forwarding address. But Callie's attention was drawn to a footnote scribbled in pencil in the margin beside 1987. Report of suspicious activity near barn. Fire pit found. Neighbors claimed to hear screaming. No action taken. Sheriff A. Hartman notified. Her father. He'd never told her that. Back at the precinct, Callie spread the contents of evidence box 87-13 across her desk. The original investigation had been rushed. No witnesses, no bus found. The FBI had stepped in for a few weeks, then pulled out after determining there was no indication of interstate movement. 12 kids. 1 driver, all gone in a morning. She flipped through the interviews again. Parents, teachers, classmates. In the middle of the stack was something she'd never noticed before. A spiral notebook. Inside were pages of interviews the school counselor had conducted with each of the missing students before the disappearance. Routine evaluations from the month prior. One entry stopped her cold. Benjamin Kessler, December 12, 1986. Said something strange during session. When asked about his favorite subject, he replied, "Not math. I like Thursdays best. That's when we go to the Red House." I asked what he meant. He became silent, then said, "It's our special stop, but we're not supposed to tell." That night, Callie lay awake in her apartment, the sound of distant sirens humming beneath her window. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Stop number 13, the Red House, the missing driver, and something else. She pulled a manila envelope from the floor. A collection of crime scene photos from the backpack. In one of the Polaroids, she saw a detail she hadn't noticed before. In the far background, barely visible beyond the last row of seats, someone had drawn a spiral on the bus window. Black marker, sloppy, overlapping rings, exactly like the ones in Benjamin's crayon sky. The next morning, Callie drove to Harrow Creek Elementary. The school still operated, though the 1980s buildings had long been replaced. She asked the secretary for archived yearbooks. "I'm looking for anything from 1986 or 87, she said. The woman nodded. "We've got a few down in the storage wing. Be careful with them. Some pages are stuck from moisture." Callie spent over an hour flipping pages. Then she found what she needed. The school bus driver section. Every year, the yearbook listed transportation staff. 1986, Earl Brenner. 1985, Earl Brenner. 1984, Earl Brenner. 1983, photo missing. 1982, photo missing. No big deal, until she flipped to the student life page from 1986. A candid photo of the cafeteria. In the background, at one of the back tables, sat several of the children who would vanish. Next to them was a man in a gray jacket. He wasn't a teacher, wasn't Earl, but he was holding a school bus keychain. March 7th, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. Callie Hartman stared at the faded yearbook photo like it might move if she waited long enough. The man wasn't the focus of the picture, just background noise. But his presence was unmistakable. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Slouched at the far end of a lunch table. Square jaw, long nose, thinning hair combed back. He wasn't smiling. His gaze was trained on the kids, his hands folded in front of him. On one finger, a thick silver ring engraved with a black spiral. He wasn't labeled, wasn't faculty, and he wasn't Earl Brenner. She flipped the page, hoping for another angle. Nothing. Whoever he was, he'd slipped through the cracks. "Done!" she called, holding the yearbook up to her phone camera. "I need this scanned and enhanced. Focus on the guy in the cafeteria photo." "Copy that. Want me to run it through facial recognition?" "Do it." She hung up, heart pounding. It had been 37 years. If this man had driven that bus or had access to it, if he was the one Benjamin referred to in the tape, then he had evaded suspicion for decades. And worse, he may have used that time to keep doing it. The next lead came from an unlikely place. The Harrow Creek Bus Depot. Callie stopped by late that afternoon, hoping to speak to any longtime employees. The depot manager, a white-haired man named Cliff Neeson, had worked there since 1980. She showed him the cafeteria photo. He squinted, leaning in. "That ain't Earl. I can tell you that right now. Recognize him?" Cliff rubbed his stubbled chin. "No name comes to mind, but that ring. Yeah, I remember that damn spiral. Creeped me out." "You saw him here?" Cliff nodded. "Couple times in '86. Came in with one of the maintenance guys, Ken something. Said he was helping install a second backup radio in bus number 37. Weird, since we'd never had two radios in one of those old Fords. Said it was a district request." Callie blinked. "There's no record of that in the transportation logs." "I'm not surprised," Cliff muttered. "Back then, we had a supervisor, Lyle Heller. Retired in '89. He signed off on things that didn't always make sense." "Do you have a photo of him?" Cliff pointed to a wall of framed employee portraits. Second row, middle frame. A dusty placard read, "Lyle Heller, Transportation Supervisor, 1974 to 1989. Callie's blood ran cold. It was the same man from the yearbook cafeteria photo, only now in a suit. Smiling faintly, still wearing that spiral ring. Back at the precinct, the facial recognition software confirmed it. Lyle Heller, deceased since 2004, heart attack at age 63, which made him impossible to question, but not impossible to investigate. Dunn returned with his personnel file. Callie flipped through it quickly. Employment history, union records, tax forms. Then she found something buried in the back, a disciplinary note from 1981, signed by a former school principal. Concerns raised over Mr. Heller allowing unauthorized individuals on district property after hours. Incident involved a school bus being moved without dispatch notice. Claimed it was a mechanical test run. No follow-up recorded. Callie circled the phrase, unauthorized individuals. She leaned back in her chair. eyes scanning the new case board she'd started. The photos, the timeline, the drawings, the word him scrawled beside the stick figure in Benjamin's crayon picture. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a rogue driver. It was systemic, coordinated. Later that night, she visited the Kessler house. Benjamin's mother, Miriam Kessler, still lived in the same red brick ranch on Pine Tree Lane. Her hair was silver now, pulled tight into a bun, but her eyes were sharp. When Callie knocked, she opened the door as if expecting her. "I heard," she said softly, "about the backpack. I hope to speak with you about Benjamin. Anything you remember from before the bus disappeared." Miriam hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the living room was untouched by time. Framed family photos, plastic-covered couch cushions, a faint smell of lemon oil and tea. Callie sat as Miriam poured 2 cups and returned. "He was quiet," Miriam said. "Always drawing, liked animals. He missed his father terribly." She paused, eyes glistening. "And sometimes he said strange things." "Like what?" "That he didn't like Thursdays." Callie froze. "He said Thursdays made his stomach hurt," Miriam continued. "I thought it was about school. I told him to try not to worry, but he started faking sick every Thursday morning. He said if he didn't get on the bus, he'd be safe." "Did he ever say why?" Miriam looked down at her hands. "One time he said, because the man with the ring will be driving." Callie's breath caught. Miriam whispered, "I thought he was imagining things, that it was some dream he'd had." But then, she reached for a small keepsake box on the coffee table. Inside was a drawing, another crayon piece. This one showed a bus on a bridge. Below it, water filled with faces. And in the driver's seat, stick figure, spiral ring. Back at the precinct, a technician met her at the door. "You're going to want to see this," he said. They'd enhanced the Polaroids recovered from Benjamin's backpack, adjusted exposure, ran filters, cleaned the grain. One image had stood out. It showed the aisle of the bus, students sitting stiffly. In the mirror above the windshield, a sliver of the driver's face was caught. Callie leaned close. His hand gripped the steering wheel. On the ring finger, a thick silver band with a spiral. March 8, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. Callie Hartman stood over the county survey map with a pen in her mouth and exhaustion in her shoulders. It was nearly midnight. The precinct had emptied out, but the silence only made the mystery louder. She had traced the original 1987 bus route in blue marker. Start point, 12 stops, final leg, to Harrow Creek Elementary. A clean, looping arc. But now, she added a red line. The path Walter Riggs had claimed to see the bus take, past stop 12, toward the West Woods. Then, in green, she marked the farmhouse location, 30 miles southwest, completely off route. The lines didn't match, not unless the bus had deviated intentionally, and not unless someone had already known the back roads. Roads that weren't even paved in the 80s. She flipped open the topo map from 1985 and stared. And there it was. A faint dotted line, a private easement through old farmland. It connected stop number 12, directly to parcel 41B. Not a public road, not visible anymore. But it had been there. The next morning, Callie met Officer Dunn at the edge of that overgrown path. A rusted barbed wire gate blocked the entrance, half swallowed by wild brush. "No GPS signal," Dunn muttered, checking her phone. "No current name for this trail either. Just disappears on maps after 1991. Callie stepped through the brush, boots crunching frost-bitten leaves. Within 10 minutes of walking, they found the remnants of old tire tracks, barely visible in the compacted dirt. Deep-set, narrow gauge. A match for a 1980s school bus. A little farther, the trail opened to a cleared circular patch, ringed with moss-covered stones. At the center, a rotted wood platform, its boards warped by time. "What the hell is this?" Dunn asked. Callie bent to pick up something poking through the leaf litter. A metal placard, rusted at the edges. She wiped it clean with her sleeve. Carved into the face was a spiral, not a decoration, a symbol. And beneath it, barely legible, "The returning is the removal." Dunn stepped back. That sounds culty. Because it is. They returned to the precinct with photos and measurements. CSU would come later to dig. For now, Callie needed answers about who else had ties to the route. She pulled the full employee records for the Harrow Creek Transportation Office between 1980 and 1990. Drivers, mechanics, substitutes, maintenance. 5 names stood out, listed as temporary on-call fill-ins. All 5 had overlapping records with Lyle Heller. 3 had police records for trespassing, possession, or public indecency. 1 had a sealed juvenile record. And the 5th? Gerald M. Denton, deceased 1992. Suicide, but Callie recognized his name. She pulled an old field report and scanned the handwriting. In the margins was a side note from her father. Denton worked short-term in late '86, replaced Brenner for 3 weeks due to knee surgery. No photo on file. Callie sat back, her heart pounding. 3 weeks. That was before the disappearance, long enough to gain access, long enough to build trust with kids. She opened the old student counselor notes again. And there it was. Another entry. Emily Shore. January 3, 1987. Emily says she likes the new driver. He sings songs on the back road and tells them not to tell Mr. Brenner about the secret stop. Counselor believes it's a game. No further concern. It wasn't a game. It was the setup. That afternoon, a call came in from Allie's Camera and Memories, a local photo processing shop that had been contracted by CSU to digitize the damaged Polaroids. One technician had enhanced a double exposure from the backpack. It showed 2 images overlapped, one of the bus aisle and one of an old well. Callie stared at the image on her screen. In the foreground were children's faces. In the background, a well built of stones with a wooden cap and chain crank. A bright pink ribbon hung from one of the posts. "You recognize it?" Dunn asked. Callie nodded. "There's an old well like that on the edge of the Rylands property. It was capped off years ago after a drought. My dad took me there once when I was little. Told me to stay away from it." "Why?" Callie stared at the image. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because it wasn't a well anymore. It was a pit." They arrived just before sundown. The land behind the farmhouse was uneven, the trees old and towering. Faint wind moved through the canopy like breathing. The well was still there. It sat 50 yards behind the house. Stone circle, heavy wooden cover, chained shut. The crank rusted solid, but the pink ribbon was gone. Callie circled the perimeter, flashlight in hand. "Over here," she said. On the back side of the well cap, hidden from casual view, was a carved spiral. Small, precise, and beside it, a date. January 12th, 1987. The day the children vanished. They pried the cover open. Beneath, a shaft descended into darkness. CSU would be called again. Ropes, lights, drones. But Callie knew. This was where it had started. Or maybe where it had ended. Before she could turn back, her boot knocked something loose from the side of the well wall. A small glass jar wedged behind a stone. Inside it, a slip of yellowed notebook paper. She pulled it free with tweezers. Hand steady, heart not. 12 names. Written in a child's careful scrawl. All 12 missing students. Next to each name, a drawn spiral. Except for one. Benjamin Kessler. Instead of a spiral, there was a hand-drawn arrow pointing up. March 9th, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. The glass jar sat under a forensic lamp, still beaded with soil and sweat from the dig site. A single slip of paper had changed everything. Benjamin Kessler's name stood alone, the only one without a spiral beside it. Just an arrow, pointing up, a survivor, or an escapee. Callie Hartman paced the lab, while the CSU team cataloged soil samples from the well shaft behind the farmhouse. The shaft ran deeper than expected, over 40 feet, with water at the bottom and evidence of constructed ledges partway down. But the big find wasn't at the bottom. It was what was embedded into the wall 20 feet down. A crumbling cardboard lunch tray, the kind the district used in 1987, still wrapped in the clear plastic bag from a corner store. Inside it were two things: a decomposed peanut butter sandwich, and beneath it, a half-melted pink plastic unicorn keychain, the kind a child might clip to a backpack. "I ran the inventory," said Officer Dunn, stepping into the lab. That keychain was listed as one of the missing personal items belonging to Emily Shore. Her mother described it in the original statement, said it was her daughter's favorite thing in the world. Callie turned, her mouth dry. "She was on that bus." Dunn nodded. "No doubt." The next clue came from a place no one expected. A psychiatric hospital, 2 counties over. It was Dunn who found the link. A 1994 intake file from Willow Pines Adolescent Center, a private institution shut down in 2001 after a funding scandal. The patient had been found wandering along a rural road in Ohio, barefoot and mute, wearing children's clothes that didn't fit. She gave no name, but doctors labeled her Jane Doe 21. She had a spiral scar on her shoulder, as if burned or branded. She remained institutionalized until she turned 18, and then disappeared. But her original photo ID had been archived with the state's digital files in 2009. When Callie pulled it up, she felt the breath leave her lungs. The girl was maybe 16 in the photo. Her hair had darkened, her face matured. But the eyes, the shape of the jaw, it was Whitney Dane, one of the 12. March 10th, 2024, Cleveland, Ohio. They found her living under a different name. Maya Reese, 39 years old. Worked nights cleaning office buildings, no criminal record, no family listed. Callie drove up herself. Whitney, or Maya, opened the door halfway, eyes wary. "Who are you?" she asked flatly. Callie held up her badge. "My name is Detective Callie Hartman. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to ask about 1987. About Harrow Creek. About the bus." The woman flinched. Barely perceptible, but it was there. Her hand gripped the door tighter. "I don't talk about that." Callie stepped forward. "We found a backpack, Benjamin Kessler's, hidden in the wall of a farmhouse. Inside it were Polaroids, drawings, and a list with all 12 names. Yours was there." The woman's face went pale. "We also found a well," Callie continued. 40 feet deep, ledges inside. Your unicorn keychain was down there." Tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't cry. She just nodded, slowly. "Come in," she whispered. The apartment was bare. No photos, no decorations, a mattress on the floor, one shelf with tattered books. Whitney sat on the edge of the mattress, fidgeting with the drawstring on her sweatpants. "I was 12, she said. "It was supposed to be a normal day. I got on the bus, but Earl wasn't driving. It was a substitute. Tall guy. Smelled like cologne and sawdust. Wore a ring with a black swirl. He smiled the whole ride." Callie didn't interrupt. "He told us we were going somewhere special. That school was canceled and we'd been chosen for a different kind of day. Some of the kids were nervous. Tasha started crying. Marcus wanted to get off, but the doors locked. After stop 12, we turned onto a road I'd never seen before." She swallowed. "And then the woods." "What happened at the house?" Callie asked gently. Whitney stared ahead, eyes unfocused. "They split us up. Not all at once. First, they took Tyson and Layla, told them they were special, that they were ready. We never saw them again." then Harper, then Trevor. Callie's voice shook. What about Benjamin? Whitney blinked. He got away. What do you mean? One night there was a fire. One of the men, Matthew, left a door unlocked. Ben bolted. We all heard it. He didn't scream. He just ran. I think they chased him, but he was fast. And after that, they kept us tighter. No windows, no lights, just the basement room. Callie pulled out a printed photo of the spiral ring. Whitney recoiled. Do you know who wore this? She nodded. That was Lyle. He was the leader. The others called him Father Heller, but he wasn't a priest. Number He was the school's transportation supervisor. Whitney's mouth twitched. He told us it was an honor, that we were chosen to be unwoven. I don't know what it meant. He kept saying the same thing over and over. Callie whispered it with her. The returning is the removal. Whitney looked up sharply. How do you know that? Because we found it carved behind the farmhouse, and we found something else. She handed Whitney a printed photo of the notebook page. 12 names, Benjamin's marked with an arrow. Whitney's fingers trembled as she held it. He made this, she said. Why the arrow? Because Ben said he wasn't going down with the rest of us. March 11th, 2024. Location: Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. By dawn, the well behind the farmhouse was surrounded with caution tape, portable floodlights, and a full CSU excavation team. A pulley rig had been set up, and a forensic diver named Camille Ortiz was the first to descend. What she found wouldn't make the morning papers. At 27 feet down, just above the waterline, Camille discovered a human femur, wedged between the wall and a ledge of compacted earth. By the time she reached the bottom, the count had grown to 4 long bones, partial ribs, and a small, decomposed shoe, a child's size. Detective Callie Hartman stood on the farmhouse porch, watching the evidence markers go up like tombstones. Whitney Dane had spoken for 2 straight hours the night before, and she hadn't said everything. There were things she couldn't describe, things she wouldn't. But one detail stuck. There was a door in the basement, Whitney had whispered. Not to the outside, to underneath. They called it the spiral room. And so, CSU returned with crowbars, drills, and a floor scanner. It didn't take long. Behind the furnace wall, tucked beneath a plywood panel and insulation, they found a sealed trap door, bolted shut from above. The hinges were corroded, but the wood was solid. Whoever built it had intended it to stay shut. Until now. It took 2 crowbars and 30 minutes to pry the door open. What lay beneath was a narrow stairwell, wood steps, no railing. The walls had been lined with black felt, nailed in place. At the bottom, a single windowless room. Callie descended first. Her flashlight revealed walls painted with peeling pink flowers. Dolls lined the perimeter, some handmade, others half-melted. A mattress lay in the center, rotted and sunken, and on every wall, the same spiral, drawn in marker, burned into wood, etched into the floorboards, 1 spiral per child. Callie counted 12. CSU took samples, photographed everything, bagged each artifact like it was sacred. In a rusted cabinet near the back wall, they found a stack of videocassettes labeled by hand. Unwoven Session 1. Unwoven Session 2. Whitney, compliance test. Trevor and Layla, pre-removal. Father Heller, intro tape, master copy. Callie couldn't breathe. The spiral was more than a symbol. It was a system, a ritual, an ideology. They carried the tapes to the precinct, locked them in a separate evidence room. Dunn and 2 techs prepped a viewing station. CSU provided trauma counselors on standby. Everyone knew the drill. But Callie sat alone with 1 tape in particular. Benjamin, Defiance tape. It had been recorded on January 11th, 1987, the night before the bus vanished. She hit play. At first, static, then a black screen, then a dimly lit room. Benjamin sat cross-legged on the floor, shoulders hunched, eyes swollen. Off camera, a voice said, "Tell them why you're refusing the spiral." Benjamin didn't look up. His voice was quiet. "Because it's not real." "What is real, Benjamin?" "My mom, school, outside." "The outside has already been removed. You're the last. Your name will seal the pattern." Benjamin shook his head. "You can't make me draw it." Silence, then the sound of footsteps. A hand entered frame, wearing the ring. The same spiral. The voice returned. Calmer, darker. "Then tomorrow, you'll be removed with the others." The tape ended. Callie stared at the paused screen. Her reflection stared back at her in the black of the TV. Benjamin had resisted, and somehow he'd escaped. The only one. By nightfall, the remains from the well had been catalogued. 4 distinct bone sets. Early estimates suggested at least 3 were children under 13. No IDs yet. DNA testing would take time. But Callie knew. These weren't just remains. They were names on a list, crossed out by a spiral. At 11:02 p.m., her office phone rang. It was Whitney. Her voice was hollow, but calm. "There's something I never told you," she said. "I'd lied about not seeing Benjamin after he ran." Callie sat upright. "When did you see him?" "The night before the bus came," Whitney said. "They brought us all to the spiral room for what they called the final removal. But Benjamin..." He stood up. "And?" "He had something in his hand. A tape recorder. He told Heller he'd made his own version of the spiral. That it couldn't be broken." "What does that mean?" Whitney whispered. "He said mine goes up." March 12th, 2024. Location: Harrow Creek Police Evidence Archive at 6:14 a.m. Callie Hartman stood inside the freezing concrete bowels of the Harrow Creek Police Department. The Evidence Archive, Sub-Level B. Only 3 people had the key. She was one of them. Shelves stretched into shadows. Boxes, envelopes, dust. Each item tagged with date, case number, chain of custody. Crimes long forgotten: arson, theft, assault, and cold cases. She walked the aisle labeled Archive 80 to 89. At the far end, the shelves bent slightly under the weight of forgotten grief. She found case file 87-13, the original Bus 37 disappearance folder, logged by her father in January 1987. She'd reviewed it before, but this time she looked closer. Inside the evidence log, a short list: 1 broken watch belonging to Riley Spear, 1 yellow scarf, Tasha Velez, 1 blood-stained sneaker, Caleb Wick, 1 blank cassette labeled Field Trip, Play Me. But when she checked the box, there were only 3 items. The cassette was missing. She double-checked the envelope. Empty. Her pulse quickened. She opened the department's media archive ledger, a handwritten notebook kept in the pre-digital years. Page after page of VHS and cassette entries, borrowed by officers. Returned. Or not. Then she found it. January 22, 1987. Cassette 87 FT. Temp removed. Lieutenant Hartman, A. Purpose: review possible child's confession. Return status: unlogged. Her father had taken the tape, and he had never brought it back. 3 hours later, Callie sat at her father's old desk in their attic. The house smelled like cedar and paper, the walls still lined with boxes her mother never unpacked. She opened every drawer, found old uniforms, badges, an empty photo frame, a folded note that said, "Leave it closed." No explanation. Then she opened the gun safe. Inside, beneath the revolver and ammunition, was a zippered canvas pouch labeled, "Personal, do not file." She opened it slowly. Inside, a small black cassette tape. Blue label. Familiar handwriting. "Stop, number 13. Play me." Callie's hands began to shake. She drove straight to the lab. The CSU tech threaded the tape into a digitizing unit and hit record. Then the sound filled the room. At first, static. Then a voice, a child's voice. Benjamin Kessler. "My name is Ben. I'm 11. If this is playing, I didn't make it out." The tech froze. "They're going to take us to the Red House again. We're not going to school. It's Thursday. The man with the ring said we're ready for the unweaving, but I think they're lying." Benjamin's voice was steady, terrified but brave. "If they say I drew the spiral, it's not true. Mine goes up. It's not a circle. It doesn't trap you." More static. Then a whisper, someone in the background. "Ben, they're calling you." He didn't pause. "If anyone hears this, check under the floor in the basement. They hide things there, and there's another house, not the farmhouse, a different one, the real place, where they took pictures." Click. The tape ended. Callie rewound it, her mind spinning. The basement floor had already revealed the spiral room, but not a second house. She pulled up the topo maps again, compared property records. Then she found it. A parcel purchased by Winding Path Youth Ministry in 1986, never developed, officially closed due to failed zoning. But someone had built there, a private structure, hidden behind a dead-end logging road in the foothills, 17 miles west of the farmhouse, a place locals never talked about. Callie circled it on the map. Not the farmhouse, Benjamin had said. The real place, where they took pictures. 3 hours later, Callie, Officer Dunn, and a search unit arrived at the overgrown gravel drive. There was no mailbox, no sign, just tire-worn ruts leading into pine-soaked silence. They followed the road for half a mile until it opened to a small clearing. At the center, a low concrete bunker-like building, half swallowed by ivy and dirt. No windows. One door. It looked like a root cellar or a bomb shelter. A sign above the door had been painted over in black, but beneath it, faint words bled through. Sanctum 13. The air was sharp with mildew and iron. The door had a padlock, but CSU cut it with bolt cutters. Inside was a descending ramp, cold, narrow, lined with concrete and echoes. Flashlights flickered over rusted carts, electrical outlets, old wires. Then the hallway opened to a camera room. Tripods, tape reels, VHS players, stacks of labeled binders, some marked Whitney, Obedience, others, Tasha, Stage 2, and then Benjamin, resistance tapes, do not copy. Dozens of them. Every inch of wall space was covered in spirals. Some drawn, some burned in, but one section had been scrubbed clean, spray painted over. Callie shined her flashlight closer. Through the smears of black, she saw a final message, handwritten in red crayon. Mine goes up. Ben. March 12th, 2024. Evening location, Sanctum 13, Harrow Creek foothills. By the time floodlights bathed the concrete exterior of Sanctum 13, Harrow County Sheriff's Office had called in the FBI. But Detective Callie Hartman stayed underground. The bunker's lower levels revealed 3 rooms, a recording suite, a storage vault, and a smaller room off to the side, soundproofed, windowless, and painted pink. The floor was concrete. The air tasted like mold and regret. A mattress lay in the corner, half rotted and stained. Along the far wall, a child's handprints, small, repeating, as if someone had paced, and between them, scrawled in red pencil, "The spiral isn't the end. It's the door." Callie took a step back. It wasn't just a message. It was an instruction, a belief system. These children had been taught to view the spiral as something divine, something transforming. Some had given in, but Benjamin had refused. In the evidence vault, CSU began cataloging tapes. There were hundreds, stacked in labeled bins, bound with twine, stuffed in milk crates. The earliest dated back to 1983. Not just Harrow Creek children, Other towns, other districts. Every tape had a handwritten index card. Most followed the same format. Subject name, age, date of entry, progression stage, 1 to 4. Removal status: complete, incomplete, failed. Dozens were marked failed. Others simply read, lost. Jesus Christ, Dunn whispered. This wasn't just about Bus 37. This was national. Callie scanned for familiar names. Then she found it. Kessler, Benjamin, age 11. Entry date, December 4th, 1986. Removal status, incomplete. Last note: escape during final purification. Recovery unsuccessful. Subject may have evidence. She flipped the card. On the back was a photo. A surveillance still. Black and white. Low resolution. It showed a child's silhouette running through a pine thicket at night, a flashlight beam missing him by inches. That silhouette was burned into Callie's brain now. Benjamin. The FBI arrived with forensic units and portable servers to digitize the tape library. Callie handed off the worst of the job. She didn't need to see more, but something kept gnawing at her. Whitney's words, "He had something in his hand." A tape recorder. He said, "Mine goes up." So she returned to the main archive chamber. There, near the back, on a private shelf marked "Do Not File," she found a locked box. Heavy. Steel. Stenciled with a single symbol, a spiral, crossed out. CSU popped the latch. Inside were 7 unlabeled tapes, all different brands. Callie picked the first one and threaded it into the deck. It was a video. The screen flickered. A boy sat at a table in a room that didn't match any others. Clean walls, a window with sunlight. Benjamin. He looked into the camera. "This is my room. They don't know I'm taping. I made this because if I don't make it, maybe someone will." He leaned forward. "The spiral only works if you believe it. That's what they said. But I didn't. I made my own version. It's like a ladder. It doesn't trap you, it lifts you." The camera wobbled. Benjamin picked it up, walked across the room, and pointed it down. To the floor. He pulled back the corner of a rug and revealed something drawn in chalk. A spiral, but reversed. Wound outward, clockwise, with an arrow at the edge. "Mine goes up," he whispered. "If you follow it, you don't become one of them." The video cut to static, then a final frame. A drawing on notebook paper. 12 stick figures. 11 had spirals for heads. 1 did not. Callie felt dizzy. Benjamin hadn't just escaped. He'd documented. Hidden tapes, notes, symbols. He hadn't run blindly. He'd left breadcrumbs. At 11:52 p.m., Callie received a call from CSU Officer Jody Lynn, still excavating beneath the farmhouse. "I think we found something big." "Bigger than a basement?" "Under the basement," Lynn said. "We broke through a soft patch of earth. There's a second level. A root cellar, maybe, but there's something down there." "What is it?" "Shelves, but not for food." Callie drove out immediately. By the time she arrived, floodlights had been lowered through the spiral room floor. A tunnel, 10 feet deep, opened into a cavern-like space. Musty, cold. The walls had been carved with shelves, each one holding dozens of photo frames. Callie picked one up. It was a class photo. Harrow Creek Elementary, 1984. Each child's face had been scratched out, except one. In every frame, only one face remained. A different child each time. She moved to the back of the cellar, where a small wooden desk sat under a rusted lamp. On it, a box of Polaroids. Callie opened the lid and froze. Inside were photos from after 1987. Same bus, different children. And in every one, behind the rows of smiling kids, was the same blurry figure, wearing a spiral ring. March 13th, 2024. Location: Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. By sunrise, the cellar beneath the spiral room had been declared a secondary victim archive. A storage vault not just for memories, but for trophies. Framed school photos, scrapbooks, hair ribbons, drawings, stickers, even teeth, kept in a rusted mint tin labeled Angel Donations. This was no longer just a child abduction case. It was a ritualized abuse network, built around a symbol. The spiral wasn't just branding, it was doctrine. Detective Callie Hartman didn't sleep. She stood in the precinct's media lab, surrounded by towers of digitized footage and case files now being shared with the FBI and National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Over 31 children had been preliminarily linked to footage and items found in the cellar, and that number was still climbing. But the names she kept coming back to were the 12. The bus, 37 children. She pulled their photos back up, lining them across her desk. One of them, she was now sure, escaped. One had survived long enough to resist, but the others, she needed to know which of them had lived, and which of them had become something else. She met with Whitney Dane again later that day, this time in the precinct's family interview room. A counselor was present. Coffee steamed from a cup that sat untouched on the table. Whitney looked worn, raw, but ready. There was another level, Callie said, beneath the farmhouse. Whitney stared. We found framed school photos. From other years, other children. Some of them after your class vanished? Do you remember any of them? Whitney swallowed. There were others, she said. They never talked to us. We were always separated. But at night, we'd hear sounds, crying, sometimes humming. One time I think I heard a lullaby. From another child? Whitney nodded. Callie leaned forward. What about your group, the 12? Whitney hesitated. They picked favorites. Emily, Harper, Layla, they disappeared first. Disappeared how? They said they'd been unwoven, that they had become part of the spiral. We never saw them again. And the rest? Whitney's voice dropped. They started giving us tests, how long we could sit without moving, how long we could go without speaking. We had to write spirals, copy them over and over. If we hesitated, we didn't eat. Callie could barely process it. But Benjamin, Whitney added, he didn't follow the rules. He'd draw his spiral backwards. He'd whistle in the dark when they told us to be silent. Did they punish him? Whitney looked away. They locked him in the water room. The what? It was a dry well, deeper than the one outside. They said if he wanted to be above the spiral, he had to go under it. They left him down there overnight. Callie's stomach turned. After that, he changed. He didn't cry. He started drawing maps on the walls, places he remembered, where he thought the farmhouse was. And one night, he whispered something to me. What? If I go missing, follow the arrow. Callie pulled the list Benjamin had written from her folder, the one found in the glass jar near the outside well. 12 names, 11 spirals, 1 arrow. Benjamin Kessler. He hadn't marked himself gone. He'd left directions. Later that evening, CSU Officer Lynn called from the farmhouse again. Detective Hartman, we need you on site. You'll want to see this for yourself. She arrived just after 7 p.m. In the cellar, Lynn pointed to a crack in the eastern wall. The team had been following draft patterns. The airflow from behind the stone structure was too steady for a closed-off room. They pulled the slab back. Behind it, a narrow tunnel carved through dirt and stone, barely shoulder width. Lynn aimed her flashlight. The walls are drawn on, she said. Same chalk as before. Callie stepped inside. The tunnel curved, almost like a spiral itself, and after 15 feet, opened into a final chamber. Small, circular. On the far wall, illuminated by flashlight, was Benjamin's spiral, the one that wound outward, clockwise, with an arrow. Beneath it was a word. Alone. Callie swallowed hard. Then she saw the final artifact, a notebook wrapped in plastic, tucked into a metal lunchbox wedged into the earth. On the front, written in pencil, Ben's book, if I don't make it out. Back at the precinct, she opened the notebook. Page after page of cramped handwriting. Some scratched out, some repeated, some barely legible. But the core of it was clear. Benjamin had documented everything. He'd listed names, described rooms, drawn diagrams of the farmhouse layout, the basement, the hidden cameras, the roles of the men, Father Heller, Brother Denton, Mr. Spear. Wait. Callie froze. Mr. Spear, that was the last name of Riley Spear, one of the missing kids. She flipped pages. Mr. Spear watches us when Father Heller is gone. He knows Riley, says they're not related, but they have the same nose. She kept reading. I don't trust him. He's always there on Thursdays. And then, on the final page, if this book is found, tell my mom I didn't quit. I didn't believe the spiral. I drew my own. Mine goes up. P.S. Mr. Spear lives in a green house with a red door. His truck says Eagle Plumbing. Callie stood up. She remembered that truck. It's still parked 3 blocks from the station. March 14th, 2024, location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. By the time the search warrant was secured, 2:17 a.m., Detective Callie Hartman was already parked 3 houses down from the small green ranch with the red front door. The same house where Eagle Plumbing's white service truck had been seen idling for years. The same house that, according to Benjamin Kessler's notebook, belonged to someone called Mr. Spear. Callie had pulled up Riley Spear's case file earlier that night, just to be sure. Riley had been 10 years old when he vanished with the rest of the bus' 37 children. The name of his father, Gregory Spear, was listed but lightly redacted. He'd never been interviewed as a person of interest, claimed to be working out of state at the time of the disappearance. Alibi, never confirmed. And no one had ever followed up, until now. At 2:32 a.m., 4 squad cars rolled up silently. 1 marked unit, 3 unmarked. Officers approached the door from both sides, spotlights off, flashlights drawn low. Callie stood at the center. She knocked once. Firm a light flicked on inside. Footsteps. A pause. Then the door opened. Gregory Spear looked older than his driver's license photo. Graying hair, heavy-set, t-shirt tucked into sweatpants. He blinked, squinted. "What's going on?" "Mr. Spear," Callie said. "We have a warrant to search the property." He started to protest, but the paper was already in his face. Officers stepped inside. "Sir," one said, "step back from the entrance. Keep your hands where we can see them." Spear complied, but Callie caught something in his expression. Not fear, not confusion, resignation. The house was modest, clean, lived in, until they got to the basement. Wood-paneled walls, a bar in the corner, a water heater humming in a back closet, and a cabinet, locked. Officers pried it open. Inside, a ring. Silver, heavy, worn smooth in the center but unmistakable. A black spiral. Callie stared. "Bag it," she said. Then she noticed the photo frame resting behind it. She reached for it, slowly. It was a Polaroid. No label, a school bus, empty aisle, photographed from the back seat, and standing at the front, blurred but unmistakable, was Gregory Spear. Back upstairs, Callie sat across from him in the kitchen. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a small clock shaped like a black cat. "Do you remember Benjamin Kessler?" she asked. Spear stared down at his hands. "You knew his mother. You worked part-time at the school. You were there the week the children disappeared." Silence. "You drove bus 37 on Thursdays." Still nothing. Callie laid the ring on the table, then the photo. She leaned in. "You stood at stop number 13. His eyes twitched. Not a full flinch, just a reaction. And that was enough. "I want to know what happened to Benjamin." Spear finally looked up. His voice was hollow. "You're not going to find him." "Why?" "Because he doesn't exist anymore. Not the way you think." Callie leaned back. Her voice dropped low. "Tell me what Sanctum 13 was." Tell me what you were. Spear exhaled through his nose. It wasn't a cult. It was a filter. The world doesn't protect children. It weakens them, teaches them to obey. The spiral was our correction. He nodded to the ring. It was a symbol, a cycle. Start at the edge, move inward, strip away their masks. You tortured children, Callie said, steady. Spear smiled. It was small, sad. We liberated them. Some couldn't handle it, but Benjamin, he was different. He believed he could undo us. He looked up directly into her eyes, and for a while, I think he almost did. At 3:47 a.m., CSU discovered a crawl space beneath Spear's garage. Inside, a locked metal trunk. Inside that trunk, videotapes, a journal, and a wooden toy unicorn. Burned down the side. Benjamin's handwriting filled the journal margins. Callie sat down on the garage floor and flipped through the pages. Dozens of entries, plans, routes, a map of Harrow Creek with stars drawn in red pen. Each marked location was tied to something from the tapes or Whitney Dane's memory. The farmhouse. The dry well. The private parcel labeled Sanctum 13. And finally, a cemetery just outside town. Grave number 219, row 6. Look beneath the spiral. Just after sunrise, Callie walked that final stretch of ground. The cemetery was damp with thawing frost. A mist hugged the grass. Row 6, grave 219. The stone was small, cracked. No name. Just a spiral etched into the surface. No dates. Just a single phrase. Returned. She dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to the earth, and felt something. Hollow. March 15th, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek Cemetery. The grave had no coffin, no human remains. Just a wooden lockbox, buried 2 feet beneath the frost-packed soil of plot number 219, Harrow Creek Cemetery. The spiral carved into the stone above wasn't a headstone. It was a marker, a signpost. Someone had wanted it found. CSU laid the box on a blue tarp and stepped back while Callie opened it. Inside, a bundle of cassette tapes wrapped in an old blue scarf. A notebook, water-stained but legible. And on top, a photo of a boy with dark eyes, short hair, and a shy smile. Handwritten on the back, Ben, age 11, right before the bus. The tapes were cataloged, digitized. Most were Benjamin speaking directly into the recorder, quietly, urgently, often from hiding. Day 5 underground. I hear them upstairs. They're looking for the spiral, but mine's different. It's not a trap. I think Whitney's still alive. They took her to the testing room. I saw her shadow under the door. If I die in here, tell my mom I remember what her voice sounds like, even if I can't hear it now. The last tape was shorter, crackling, the voice more distant. I buried this where I used to walk with my dad, near the angel statue, plot 219, under the fake grave. A pause, then, don't look for me, but if you do, start at the beginning. The notebook was a survival map, not just of the farmhouse in Sanctum 13, but of every place Benjamin had been taken. Duct roads, tunnels, underground spaces, markings. He'd written in code for the final entries. Spiral patterns with numbers and coordinates that CSU was still decrypting. But one message was written clearly, on the inside cover. If this notebook is found, it means I died before the others. But I didn't spiral. I climbed. Ben. That same morning, Callie sat down with Whitney Dane one last time. They played Benjamin's recordings together, one by one. By the third tape, Whitney was weeping. Not violently, just quiet, steady tears, as the voice of the boy she hadn't seen since 1987 filled the room. I thought he was dead, she whispered. Callie nodded. We still don't know for sure. I do, Whitney said. I heard them say it. The one who wouldn't spiral has been returned. Returned where? Whitney just shook her head. Then softly, there was another bus. That afternoon, Callie requested access to the Pennsylvania Department of Education's bus records from 1987. There it was, bus number 37. Last registered to Harrow Creek Elementary. Route canceled as of January 13th, 1987. But another bus, bus number 49, had been acquired by Winding Path Youth Ministry under a religious exemption and removed from state registry 2 days before the disappearance. Private sale. No destination filed. The VIN was traced, but the bus had never been recovered. Until now. At 5:18 p.m., a 911 call came in from a retired farmer 4 miles outside Harrow Creek. His property bordered the old Winding Path land. He'd been clearing trees when the backhoe hit something metal. Callie arrived 40 minutes later. Half buried beneath pine needles and dirt, its wheels rusted off and windows shattered, was the missing second bus. Bus number 49. CSU pried open the side panel. Inside were 2 bench seats, ripped from their mounts, bloodstains, charred wood, and on the rear wall, a spiral, drawn in ash. And over it, scratched violently into the metal. Not this time. By 9 p.m., federal agents had declared the Winding Path investigation officially reclassified. They weren't dealing with one abduction, or one cult, or one location. They were dealing with a network, a pattern, and the spiral, once just a symbol, was now a warning sign. Callie sat in her car outside the Harrow Creek Cemetery as night fell. She held the final Polaroid again. Ben, age 11, smiling faintly, unaware of what would come. She thought of the arrow he drew on every spiral, how he tried to uncoil what had been wound too tight, how he whispered in the dark so the others knew they weren't alone. Mine goes up. March 17th, 2024. Location, Harrow Creek and surrounding region. The morning sky over Harrow Creek was colorless. Gray mist clung to the fields. Church bells rang somewhere in the distance. It felt like the kind of day where something long buried finally surfaced. No fanfare, just silence breaking at the edges. Detective Kelly Hartman stood beside plot number 219, staring at the spiral stone for the last time. Not a grave, a signal, a declaration. By 10 a.m., federal agents executed coordinated warrants across 5 counties. One led to an abandoned photography studio in Butler, Pennsylvania. Walls painted black, spiral symbols burned into the wooden floor. Another led to a now-shuttered daycare in Ohio, founded in 1985 by a former Winding Path missionary. Lockers still labeled with first names. One read, Harper. At each location, materials were found, photos, video reels, journals, a common thread, the spiral, and a second name that kept appearing, the unweaving a doctrine, a process, the idea that children had to be broken down to find truth. But the tapes Benjamin left behind, his audio journals, sketches, survival strategies, formed the basis of a new investigative framework, because Benjamin hadn't just escaped. He'd mapped the network, named its parts, and left instructions. Later that afternoon, Callie and CSU returned to the second bus site, bus number 49. They'd cleared more of the debris now, photographed every inch. At the rear corner, behind a melted vinyl seat, a child's satchel was found, sealed with duct tape. Inside, a broken compass, a drawing of the farmhouse with an X beneath it, and a second drawing, 12 stick figures, all in a line. One of them, the final one, was colored in blue. An arrow pointed upward from it. Benjamin. The next week, Whitney Dane spoke publicly for the first time. She held a press conference beside Callie Hartman and agents from the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force. She wore no makeup, didn't smile, just stepped to the microphone and said, "We weren't runaways. We were taken. They told us we were chosen, but really we were trapped. Benjamin Kessler wasn't just a victim, he was our map out. Over the following days, 2 more survivors came forward. One from North Carolina, another from Indiana. Both were children who'd vanished in the late 80s. Both remembered the spiral, the tests, the door with no handle. Both remembered a boy who whispered stories when no one else would. He told us we weren't crazy, one said, that someone outside would follow the arrow. On March 25th, 2024, Callie stood alone inside the spiral room, the basement chamber beneath the Harrow Creek farmhouse. Most of the chalk had been scrubbed clean now. The spiral walls were bare, but in the back, behind the old shelving, something faint still remained. Not a spiral, a drawing, a ladder drawn in white, 12 rungs. At the top, a small stick figure, reaching up toward the corner of the wall. It had no spiral for a head, just a tiny arrow, pointing up. April 14th, 2024 location, Harrow Creek, Pennsylvania. The ceremony was small, quiet, held in the Harrow Creek Community Center gym, the same one where Bus 37 had once parked out front every morning, waiting for 12 children to file aboard. Now, it was filled with folding chairs and flickering candles. Photographs lined the stage. Some from school yearbooks, others newly unearthed from the farmhouse or Sanctum 13. They'd been cleaned, restored, faces sharpened. Tasha, Riley, Emily, Layla, Harper, Caleb. And at the far end, a photograph of Benjamin Kessler, the only one smiling. A plaque was unveiled at the base of the gymnasium flagpole, in memory of the children of Bus 37. The ones who were lost, the one who showed us how to find them. Harrow Creek Unified School District, April 2024. Whitney Dane sat in the front row. She'd chosen not to speak, but as the final name was read aloud, she held something tight in her hand. A cassette tape, marked only, "Mine goes up." She would never play it again, but she needed to hold it, because Benjamin had given them all one final gift. Not escape, not vengeance, perspective. Detective Callie Hartman stood in the back. She didn't wear her badge. Just a black jacket, her hair tied back, a pen in her pocket, and a worn copy of Benjamin's notebook folded into her coat. She would go on to join the FBI Behavioral Crimes Division 2 months later, specializing in ritualized child exploitation networks. Her reports would cite the Harrow Creek spiral case as the blueprint for how survivors survive, not by erasing what happened, but by rewriting the path out. The spiral was no longer the only shape. Now there was a ladder. As the sun began to set, Whitney walked the length of the old bus yard, now overgrown with grass and bordered by chain link. She paused by the last parking stripe. Someone had spray-painted an arrow there, faint, white, worn down by years of wind and weather. She knelt and traced it with her hand, and whispered, "Thank you for climbing."